Hello and welcome to Anti-Social Studies, where you can get tutored from your own couch. My name is Maddie. I'm an experienced tutor and a recent Harvard graduate, and I've created this series to help you slay the SAT. In this episode, we're going over some study tips and general strategies to help you get your personal best score on the day of the SAT. If you watched the first video, you've heard it before and you'll hear it again, but the best thing you can do for yourself to help prepare you for the SAT is practice. These videos can be helpful on their own, but the way to make sure that these strategies really sink in is to practice in between videos. The 8 practice tests that are in the back of the College Board practice book and on the College Board website that you can download for free are going to be some of the best tools you can use to help you practice. Knowing what the strategies are is one thing, getting really good at using them is another. You don't want to have to think about what strategies you're using on test day. You want it to be automatic and you want it to feel natural. So practicing them over and over and over again using official tests from the College Board is the best possible way to do that. Whenever possible, you want to try to complete your practice work under testing conditions. That basically means that you want to complete your practice tests in the exact same conditions that you'll be using on test day. So that's why I encourage everyone to print out the practice tests if you're not getting the College Board practice book. That way you're doing it on pencil and paper just like you will on test day. You'll also want to find a quiet place to practice. You don't want to have any distractions, and you want to be able to do full sections and preferably even full tests all at once without having to stop. That'll help build up your stamina for when you actually have to take the test in a full 4-hour block. You'll also want to time yourself when you practice. On the SAT, each section is timed very strictly, so you definitely want to get used to exactly how much time they give you to complete each section. I'll let you know exactly how much time you have for the sections that we practice together in the videos, but for your own reference, here's how much time you have for each different section on the SAT. The reading section is 65 minutes long. The writing and language section is 35 minutes long. The no calculator math section is 25 minutes long, followed by the calculator section, which is 55 minutes long, and the essay is 50 minutes long. Even if you run out of time when you're practicing, keep going. Just put a mark on your page where the timer ran out. That way you can figure out how much pacing is an issue for you, if you need to work on your time management, and things like that. But you definitely want to finish the entire section to get as much practice as possible. A very important tip for practicing under testing conditions: don't look things up when you're practicing. There certainly isn't Google in the classroom with you when you're taking the SAT, so make sure that you're not Googling answers when you're practicing, as tempting as it may be. If you can't figure out the answer to a question, that's okay. Just circle it, put a little question mark next to it, or give your best guess, and you'll go over it later when you're going over the answers to the section. But Googling will just make you think that you're a master at something that probably still needs a little bit of work. So try to take the test as you will on the actual test day, and then you can go over the answers later. Mark up your paper. I know that this can feel super weird or dumb for people that don't do this normally, but trust me, it's very important on the SAT to write all over it. Underline and circle keywords, cross out answers that you know are wrong, circle or put a big question mark next to things that you're unsure of. That way, once you've taken your first pass at the section, you can go back and be right back in the question like you were looking at it the first time. You'll remember what parts of the questions are most important, you'll remember which answers you already know are wrong, and you'll remember which questions you had trouble with the first time. When you're finished taking a section or a test, correct it. But don't tell yourself what the right answers were. Put a check or an X, depending on if you got the answer right or wrong, and then you can go back and take another crack at the questions that you got wrong. All of the answers to the practice tests are in the back of the practice book or online on the College Board website. It's important to keep track of how many questions you're getting right and wrong on each section so that you can track your progress and maybe even track how close you are to getting your goal score. You'll also get a hint as to which sections you need to work on the most and which ones you're already pretty good at. Now we're going to go over some general strategies that will help you throughout the entire test. The first tip: answer every question. Some tests will penalize you for guessing, meaning they might take away 1/4 of a point for every answer that you get wrong. The SAT is not that kind of test. The SAT does not take away points for an answer that you get wrong. You just obviously won't gain that point if you get the answer wrong. But that means that if you have no idea what an answer should be, you should still take a guess. Think about it this way. If you cross off even one answer that you know is wrong, your chances of getting that answer right are 25% higher. Cross off 2 answers, you have a 50-50 shot of getting it right, so you might as well take your best guess. Of course, you want to take your time to get the right answer if you have the time left, but if you're running out of time, or if you have absolutely no idea what the answer is, this is a really great strategy to help. It's called letter of the day, and it might seem crazy at first, but basically, you go into the test day with a letter in mind. Let's say my letter of the day is A. For every question that I can't even cross off a wrong answer, or that I totally ran out of time and it's just blank on my fill-in sheet, I will put A for every single blank. The trick to this is that if you blindly guess and pick a different letter for each one you're guessing at, then you're actually more likely to get all of them wrong. But if you take the same letter and guess it for every single blind guess you're doing, then chances are you'll get at least a couple of them right. To be clear though, do not use the letter of the day strategy if you have any idea what the answer is, or if you have any time left to look at it. If you can cross off even one wrong answer, your chances are a lot better of getting the question right. The 2 passes strategy is a very effective and important strategy for getting your personal best score on the SAT. The 2 passes strategy is basically a way to make sure that you have enough time to answer the questions that are easiest for you. On the SAT, it's important to remember that a point is a point is a point. On the reading section, the hardest question that you'll tackle is worth the exact same amount as the easiest question that you'll tackle. So you might as well spend the first time going through the section answering all of the questions that are easiest for you and gathering up those points before spending a little more time on the harder questions. Pro tip: when skipping questions, make sure you're skipping answers. Make sure that when you're skipping questions because they're too hard or you want to take a look at them later, that you're also skipping the answers on the answer sheet. Every 5 questions or so, you want to check which question you're working on and make sure you're filling in the right bubble. On the first pass, you're going to pick the lowest hanging fruit. Go through each group of questions a little bit quicker and answer only the ones that are easiest for you. On pass 2, it's time to pick your battles. Pass 2 is the time to pick and choose which questions you're going to tackle with your remaining time. If you have a ton of time left on your second pass, you can try to go to each harder question and take a crack at it. If you're running out of time, you know you should go through and pick the ones that you have the best chance of getting right. Again, if you run out of time and you have some blanks, don't forget to use your letter of the day strategy. Here are some tips based on each specific section and how you can apply the 2 passes strategy. On pass 1, in the reading section, if you're finding a passage really difficult to understand, consider just skipping it and coming back to it later if time allows. Remember, the reading and writing and language sections are not organized in order of difficulty. So maybe the easiest passage for you is waiting for you at the end of the section. The same goes for the set of questions that go with each passage. Within a set of questions, the questions are in chronological order, meaning the order in which you would find the answers to the questions in the passage. That means that they're not arranged in order of difficulty. And some questions at the very end of the set of questions might be a lot easier for you than the ones at the beginning. Within a set of questions about a passage, skip the hardest ones until the end. And by the end of your set of questions, you'll have a much better idea of what the passage is about because you've had to go back and find your evidence for all of these questions, and that way it'll be a lot easier for you to tackle those harder questions. In the writing and language section, you want to take a similar approach to the reading section on the first pass. If you know from experience that time is tight for you on this section in the SAT, then plan to skip a handful of questions and come back to them if time allows. Always keep in mind that there are easier questions waiting for you at the end of the section and at the end of the passage. The math questions are arranged in order of difficulty. During the first pass, don't spend more than a minute or so on each question. If you look at a question and it immediately occurs to you that you know how to solve it, you want to answer those right away. But if there are ones that are going to be tricky for you, skip them and come back to them if you have time. Remember, every question within a section is worth the same amount. So the very easiest question that you tackle is going to be worth the same amount of points as the very hardest question you tackle in that same section. So you might as well spend the time getting all of the ones you can get right done first, and then coming back and trying to tackle those harder ones. Now on to pass 2. In the reading section, you should have gone through and for the questions you decided to skip, crossed out a couple of answers that you knew were wrong. If you did manage to narrow a couple of questions down to 2 choices on your first pass, you'll want to go back and do those now. Remember, For the reading and writing and language sections, the answers that are correct will always have evidence to support them in the passage. If you find the evidence, you've found your answer. On your second pass in the math section, you want to prioritize in ascending order of difficulty. That basically just means do the easier questions first. Once you're done with your first pass, go back to the beginning of the section and try from there, because the easier questions tend to be towards the beginning. When tackling the SAT, you're going to want to find your own personal level of difficulty. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Every single question, from the most basic algebra function to the most complicated quadratic, from the most basic grammar fix to the most complicated main idea question, every single question is worth the same amount. Some questions are going to be very straightforward and you'll be able to answer them in less than 10 seconds. Others are going to be a lot more challenging and they might take you upwards of 5 minutes to solve. The most important and effective thing that you can do is focus first on the questions that you know are easiest for you, and then go back and tackle the time-consuming or difficult questions afterwards. Here are some tips for each specific section based on level of difficulty. The passages on the reading section are of differing levels of complexity. Within each passage, the questions are asked as they emerge logically in the order the relevant information is presented in the passage. That means that the difficulty throughout the section is a mixed bag. It's okay to skip the questions that are hardest for you. The last thing you want to do is get hung up on a question that takes you a really long time or is really difficult, and then not get to questions at the end that you could have answered really quickly. Pro tip, trust yourself. Despite what you might have heard, these questions are not designed to trick you. If you are really sure that an answer is correct, it probably is, as long as you can find the evidence in the passage to back it up. Just like in the reading section, the questions in the writing and language section are a mixed bag when it comes to difficulty, because they're presented in the order they come in the passage. If you find yourself running out of time on the writing and language section, make sure you get to those easy questions first and skip the harder, more time-consuming ones for the end. And finally, the math section. It's pretty easy to figure out where the difficult questions lie in the math section because they tend to be in order of difficulty. So, pro tip, do the easier questions first and know where the harder questions are. Both math sections begin with multiple choice questions, and then they move on to a handful of student-produced responses, which are sometimes called grid-ins. The first few grid-ins are always easier than the last few multiple choices, so if you're struggling with the end of the multiple choice sections, skip those last few hard ones and go to the first few grid-ins, which will probably be a little bit easier. To sum it all up, if you learn, follow, and practice the strategies in this video, you could raise your score hundreds of points above where it could have been. If you have any questions at all, please leave a comment down below and I'll try to get back to you. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends if you think it'll be helpful, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell notification icon so that you get notified when I upload a new video. If you have any suggestions as to what other topics I should cover in the future, let me know in a comment down below. And, as always, happy studying!